Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on the Rape of Lucrece, which, as the title might suggest, is about sexual violence towards women, and there's also some suicidal ideation thrown in there. So if those are triggers for you, please tune out now. If they are not, and you want to hear today's stanzas, we're going to look at stanzas 193 to 196, which it's the morning after Lucrece has been up all night, grieving, mourning, feeling guilty, going through just a really bad emotional time. But then she called in her maid and they had a nice little moment together. But then she sends her maid to get a messenger to deliver a letter to her husband. She writes a letter that basically just says, please come home, I need to see you. But she doesn't get into any greater detail because she doesn't want to give it away and she doesn't want him to start drawing conclusions about what might be wrong before he gets home. So she seals up that letter and she hands it to the messenger. And at the end of yesterday's stanzas, when she was handing it to the messenger, she got very self-conscious because she became very aware of the fact, at least in her own head, she thought that he could see on her what had happened to her. She feels like he knows what happened and she's very uncomfortable with that. And stanza 193 picks up exactly there, saying, when, silly groom, God wot, it was defect of spirit, life, and bold audacity. Such harmless creatures have a true respect to talk in deeds, while others saucily promise more speed, but do it leisurely. Even so this pattern of the worn-out age pawned honest looks, but laid no words to gauge. His kindled duty kindled her mistrust, that two red fires in both their faces blazed. She thought he blushed, as knowing Tarquin's lust, and blushing with him, wistly on him gazed. Her earnest eye did make him more amazed. The more she saw the blood his cheeks replenish, the more she thought he spied in her some blemish. But long she thinks till he return again, and yet the duteous vassal scarce is gone. The weary time she cannot entertain, for now 'tis stale to sigh, to weep and groan. So woe hath wearied woe, moan, tired moan, that she her plaints a little while doth stay, pausing for means to mourn some newer way. At last she calls to mind where hangs a piece of skilful painting made for Priam's Troy, before the which is drawn the power of Greece for Helen's rape the city to destroy, threatening cloud-kissing Ilion with annoy, which the conceited painter drew so proud, as heaven, it seemed, to kiss the turrets bowed. So the first of these stanzas is just picking up where yesterday left off. Actually, the first two is picking up where yesterday left off, saying, normally it would be a shame for him to look at her and blush at her the way that he did, and like for the two of them to not even exchange a word about it, just these sort of weird looks. But what happened was they got into this sort of weird downward spiral where when as he was looking at her, she thought that he was blushing because he knew that she had just slept with Sextus Tarquinius, even though he doesn't. So then she starts blushing because she's ashamed of what he thinks of her, but then he starts blushing because she's blushing, and the two of them just go back and forth in this sort of embarrassment spiral, which is kind of an interesting throwback to when Sextus Tarquinius first arrived back at Caladium and she greeted him at the door. And she was, doing that blushing, but then the pale skin, but then the blushing, but then the pale skin thing that he found so attractive in her. It's interesting now that the blushing has taken on this, it's not an attractive thing anymore. It's a shameful thing that she wants to be hiding, and she probably wanted to hide it then, but she wasn't as concerned about it. But anyway, it made the whole exchange with this messenger very uncomfortable. But then she sort of comforts herself by saying he's going to be gone for a while. But then she realizes that she has to pass the time somehow, and she's sort of cried herself out. She can't really mourn about this anymore right now. She needs some other thing to do to distract her. So she remembers that there's this painting that she can go and look at, a painting of the city of Troy, or a painting of Ilion, one of those, a painting in reference to that whole war and Helen of Troy and all that sort of stuff that's supposedly so good that the gods came down and kissed the earth on which this painter lived, or some such thing. And we are going to hear more about this fantastic painting in tomorrow's stanzas. So yay for that. I'll see you then. Mwah.